Welcome, Hannes, to the Targeting Website Pages. It's a great pleasure to talk with you about your solo project and this new album, To Where the Light Retreats. Tell me, what did you decide to release all your productions independently for a big labels or underground labels? Did you have offers from other for now and unknown labels, and which?
I would say I didn't really put any time into looking for a label in the first place. I mean, the solo project was never meant to be on a label because, well, let's put it this way: I'm not gonna play, or I don't intend to play live with this project, or at least I don't have concrete plans to. Because it's just me, and I would have to hire musicians or get my friends to help me out. But it's more or less a studio project, and that for a label is not necessarily very intriguing. They want bands to perform live, so for me that wasn't even an option. So I didn't even try to look into a label. Also, if I do it myself, and for the first two albums I did crowdfunding projects on Indiegogo, which were quite successful, and I saw that I can finance it myself without the help of a label, and then I have full control and I'm fully independent. So there are some advantages these days. Of course, I have to put in all the work myself, but I have to do that anyway. So I rather than keep 100% of, whenever, the revenue is, and make it worth the time I put in, because when I work with a label, of course, they get a bigger part of the share of what they sell. And that's, well, I put a lot of time into this project, so I must make sure that the time somehow pays back. Of course, it doesn't fully, but at least I have full control. So that's my thought.
As a drummer, you have played various styles of metal throughout the last years. You're also successful composer and producer, sound engineer too. Which task and what style do you find the most challenging into your whole career?
It depends. It's I do all these things because I do not want to repeat myself. It's when I was younger, I was completely obsessed with just drumming and find my own voice in the drumming field. But the more and more I did it, I thought actually producing is something that interests me more, and songwriting, and like the whole thing, making music. And sometimes in bands you have guys that write more songs than others, and even with some of our favorite metal bands, we know like certain people in the band write songs while certain other players just play. And I figured out I'm more like the songwriter type of musician. So it was a little bit out of necessity. When with Obscura, we toured a lot. We were on tour all the time. And once I did not play drums for Obscura anymore, I had to ask myself, hey, what am I doing with the additional time? And I thought like, well, now finally I can start my studio and produce other bands, because that's what I'm really interested in. I really enjoy sound engineering. So of course I always try to do different things. And what the most difficult is, it depends on what the project is. For my own band, the Alkaloid production was very, very difficult. It was more difficult than playing drums on that album. Like the mix was more difficult than playing drums on the album. And well, with other projects, for instance, Hate Eternal, when I played for them, the drumming was incredibly difficult because everything is super fast and extreme. So it really depends. I have to say, I always take on challenges that are difficult and once in a while, and that is also where I can improve. I'm not really the practice guy that practices for the sake of practicing. I rather work on projects and overcome certain difficulties, and then I get better by this with
Hmm.
experience.
Oh, speaking a bit about your performance with other instruments like a guitar and bass, as because you did all on 4 albums, it distinguished that you have various skill levels to this because you are first drummer, then guitar, then bass, and many things. So how is the compositional process in Hannes Grossman like? Do you the guitar parts first, or do you focus on the drum first?
Well, maybe I must tell that only on my first album I also recorded the guitars. And I have to say I'm a sound engineer, so I let's put it this way, I don't have to play it all in one take, the guitars,
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
know how to edit. Otherwise, I'm not that good of a guitar player. Not nearly like the people I played with. But only on that album I play guitars. The other albums are recorded by our Alkaloid guitar player Danny Tunker, and I sent over the tablatures.
Okay.
I send it to him, and he records stuff. And the same I do with bass, which is played by Linus, Obscura bass player and Alkaloid bass player.
Mhm.
And yeah, the way I write songs, it's always coming from a melodic aspect first, like a guitar riff, it's very rare that um, it starts with the drums. It happens like 2 or 3 times ever. Like whatever I wrote, it always starts with the guitar line, because the guitar line, the guitars are really something that is written out note by note. While the drums, it's rather a little bit loose. I have an idea of what I'm gonna play. Like let's say there's a blast section, there's a double bass section, there's a groove section, whatever. And but I keep it very open and very spontaneous. So the way I write is I come up with a certain guitar part and then I write it down into a notation program, because most of the time it's too fast for me. I cannot really execute what I write on guitar fully. And then especially when I do a second line, like a main riff might be one thing, but then I do a harmonization, and that really
Yeah.
is, well,
Difficult.
bad in the finger. That's for me at least. I'm not that great of a guitar player, so I write it down and then speed it up with the program for composition purpose. So I find the right tempo, and then it's basically all on notation, and
Hmm.
then this notation is one by one recorded by guitar and bass. So um, the full picture I never really see that until it's fully recorded. Then I can tell, oh yeah. And then I also change a few things in the arrangement, because then I realize this guitar line is too much, this guitar line is not working, this is working better if it,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Hmm?
So it's a step-by-step process, but most of the time it's really notation that I do.
So, what are your advantages of playing and composition more experimental bands like Blotted Science? You played with Obscura, and also you recorded the Hate Eternal last album. So, there's bands with established. So, what do you prefer to record your own music, or perhaps do you prefer to go beyond their music established for them?
It depends. The Hate Eternal record was a huge challenge, and that is also part of why I did it. First of all, as I told you already,
Yeah.
I'm always doing stuff that is challenging and that I find that I haven't done before. And this is a super extreme double bass drumming and blast beats and stuff. I did that before, but not to that extent. And I thought like, hey, it would be nice to know that I can do it, and that also I'm playing with Eric Rutan is pretty cool. So I thought like, yeah, I would like to play with Eric. And then first we started by me filling in for a tour or 2 tours. And then once he wrote songs, he asked me, hey, you want to play on the album? And I thought like, that would be nice. And so we did it. And um, again, I mean, it really depends what the project is. But of course, I have to say that with my own stuff, that's for me most important, I would say. Is not only with the solo stuff. The solo stuff is also a little bit of a fun project. So I have songs written that are, to me, not so, well, let's say not difficult, but they are difficult. But it's something I can put together really quickly. I don't spend a lot of time writing. It's just really quick songwriting, really fast procedure in that sense. Not giving like too much second thoughts about it. Just yeah, nailing out some tech death tunes or death metal tunes, and I mainly want to have fun with it. So for me, of course, those are the most fun projects. With my other band, Alkaloid, that's probably something where I would say this is artistically at least a top priority to me.
Okay.
And then also, it always depends, of course, when you're a member in a band and you're a fixed member in the band. The same goes with Triptychon. I'm a fixed member. I'm not just a session player.
Yeah.
And that has, of course, you have a different, how can you put it, a different emotional connection to the material, because you are part of it officially, and it makes a difference in your mind. But because I choose the projects to where I'm permanent member, I choose those projects something where where I think I can artistically fit, and that I like, where I like the music in the first place, more than with maybe just some of the session stuff. Of course, I don't do any stuff that I totally dislike, because that would be, why then hire somebody else, because I won't be able to contribute something useful. But of course, with my own stuff and being a permanent member of these bands, that's to me something that has artistically top priority. And the other stuff to me really is more of a bonus. And I'm glad it works out so I can do this professionally. And, this is perfect.
Okay. So speaking, as you said, speaking of the drum parts, how is it different is this new album for the percussion at the drums level? Because this new album, I feel more melodic than the previous three in your career. So did you add some improvements with new techniques and methods compared to your previous bands and albums?
I cannot really tell, actually. It's not as fast as the other stuff.
Yeah.
And maybe a little more melodic. But it's just the way I felt like when I wrote the songs, because I did the super fast stuff for a long time now. And I guess it's maybe time for a little change there, to focus more on the groovier stuff, or more on the different things to do. I don't know. The next album might be super complex again, but I don't know. For this one, I just felt that that I would like to write a little melodic and heavier album than what I did in the past. It's just a natural evolution, I think.
So the next question is on techniques that you learned in your drumming parts over the years. What do you do to avoid repeating by yourself on each album that you participate in? And is there any way to go further with more influence in the sound achieved by yourself or your other bands with your ideas, especially in the drum parts?
It really depends on the drum parts what I'm going to play. It's it really depends on the riffs and the songs what I'm going to play as drum parts. It has to match the songs, and if the songs are written by somebody else, then I have to somehow use my techniques and what I play differently each time. So the change in my playing always happens automatically, because there's different songs and different material. I don't just put all the stuff that I play on top of the same stuff over and over again. I just think what is the best drum line for a certain song or a certain part, and that's what it's gonna be. And if I cannot play it, I have to practice it, and that's the process. But also I have to say, it's not like I don't want to repeat myself at all, because repetition also can be a benefit. Because when you repeat, you don't have to repeat it 100% similar every time, but certain signature things certain signature techniques that I keep repeating, I do that because I like the sound of that. And also people can tell, hey, that is Hannes playing. And I think that is also an advantage. It's not necessarily a disadvantage to repeat yourself. You just have to find out the line with not, if it's getting bored, if I'm easily bored, and if I get bored with stuff, then I try to flip things around. But I would repeat myself also consciously, because it can be something very positive. Because the stuff that I've played twice, of course, I can play better,
Yeah. So nowadays, as you are a producer, as engineer, as a musician, nowadays the music in general has divided opinions between those who prefer the most genuine music and other people who think that with more technology, the results will be better. What do you think about technology as a musician and producer in a music and a metal today? Because a lot of bands try to do the things like a machine, and other people get lazy with technology.
Yeah, I agree. I would say technology is great, because I could not get the results I get without modern producing technology, because if I would achieve the same sound with just analog equipment, recording and mixing equipment, I would need, I don't know, $300,000 of equipment or more to make it happen. And with technology, I can get to a similar, not the same result, of course, but to a good sounding result that, well, yeah, where I'm, where I don't have to spend so much money, and that is definitely an advantage. And also from the technology, I learned a lot, because even practicing, I thought about it today when I was sitting behind the drum kit. With all the recording programs, it's so great to line up even click tracks and program click tracks. Back in the 70s or stuff like this wasn't easy to do. So you had like these analog metronomes that go tick tock, and it's not the same thing as when a computer tells you where the exact time is and you practice with it. So there are advantages. However, I have to say, what you probably refer to is the super quantized drums and the super drum computer sounding drums played by real drummers. I detest that completely. There is, let's put it this way, I've played on albums where you had to play super tight. Two albums, one was the Blooded Science album, the other one was the Necrophagist album, and I practiced like for months to be able to pull that off. And then again, so with albums like that, with music like that, I can also see that for a band like Meshuggah or something like that, the supercomputer timing, it fits the music. So if it fits the music, then it's okay. But what I'm seeing today is that certain, especially younger bands, they think it's an industry standard to make the drums sound like a computer and have no natural timing, no natural flow, whatever, just quantize it. And I find that pretty horrible, because to me, it's like 1980s keyboards. They all sound the same. And also these drummers sound the same. I mean, I don't know, I don't want to drop names or something, but even when you hear some of the more famous drummers these days, or more famous metal drummers, you cannot tell it's them because it's quantized. I mean, what's the point? You have a world-class drummer and you quantize it. It makes no sense. to me. It's completely unmusical, and also with the sound replacement of, not using natural drums. You can use the technology to support your natural signals to make them even sound better. But I mean, there's a line. If it's automatically like a drum machine, and that's the drum sound, like the standard go-to drum sound, then it's not analog music anymore. It's more like an electronic music. It's more like techno, and it's not for me. So I don't like that. I would rather listen like to punk rock than to a super quantized, sterile sounding band. I don't like it at all.
Okay, so to the level you have reached as a drummer into the extreme music, it is important to you keep practicing new techniques, and which is having the hardest to be a great master like you are.
To be honest, I have a very flexible playing technique. If by techniques you mean like different textures, like polyrhythms and stuff like that, I only practice that when I have to play it. But let's put it this way: like new techniques, the technique I use is like a hand technique. It's more or less a signature technique, which I practiced very extensively. And with that technique, I can pretty much play everything. Yeah. I've never encountered something with my hands that I could not play with that technique. I can create any sound with that. And if not, then I can always say, okay, then it sounds like me. So whatever. So I'm 38 now. I don't really practice technique a lot. It's rather musicality. What I practiced recently was more like jazz drumming, swing patterns and stuff like that. So you could say that's new techniques. I mean, I did that when I was younger, and I'm refreshing it and trying to get better at that, at some jazz drumming, because I can take some of the jazz music texture and put it into something else. And also, this connects your last question. I noticed that these, of course, jazz drummers, they don't sound replace. They don't use technology to that extent. They don't quantize drums. So they put on a few microphones and they record it, and that's it. That's the sound. And also, sometimes they don't even have a click track. It's just, loose timing, and it sounds great. So I thought I have to apply more of the jazz approach, because it's the opposite of what I see in the mainstream metal, because mainstream metal is like really to the grid, to a computer, and I want to get away from that. And I think jazz drumming is a great way to get away from that and remind yourself that it's an acoustic instrument, and that's how it's gonna sound. So that would be a technique that recently I got involved in. And it's, of course, it's quite difficult. Everything you want to master to a certain degree is difficult. Even a simple 4/4 groove can be difficult if you really want to be able to always play it 100%. It's always difficult to, on an instrument, on a certain level, there are no easy things anymore. It's really just, if you have the approach to always play at your best, then it's always difficult, no matter what it is, to a certain extent. So of course I have to keep my, let's say, drumming fitness to a certain degree.
Yeah. So we are very near to end this interview. I saw that you have a career with big names in the world. Yeah, the previous name. So in the metal scene especially, and it is inevitable to ask who was the best and worst musician that you play?
The best and the worst. The worst. Well, luckily for me, I can say that I cannot really, like, a really bad musician. I don't know. I really
because for his characters. I don't know. For his characters,
well,
because I know in
If
person
I encounter
because
a bad musician, then I consider it a waste of time and I don't get involved. So I have to really the benefit of, or the luck or the pleasure or the, I don't know, honor to only have played with amazing musicians pretty much. That's also what I thought. You know, when I'm always the best musician in the room, you never learn. I mean, you have to play with people that are better than you, and thus you learn. So, but picking a single one, I mean, they're all so talented. It's really, really difficult. Um, huh. I mean, there have been really special musicians like Ron Jarsenbeck with Blotted Science. He is a master of composing and really has a very special approach to music and a knowledge that is really beyond. But the same goes for many other players I played with. Yeah, it's hard to name one single person because they all do different things and they're all equally equipped for it.
okay. Okay, so if you have the opportunity to choose one musician or two, or one of members for a new band into the extreme scene, with whom would you like to make a new album and project, and why?
Like if I could pick anybody, but it has to be a metal musician, right?
Yeah, it's a metal musician.
Okay. Actually, that's pretty much what I'm doing. Um, you know, um,
Perhaps someone in Norway, perhaps someone in US.
yeah, I'm thinking about it, but that's something I'm already doing with not only my solo project but also with my band Alkaloid, and then again, and then in Triptychon I'm playing with Tom Warrior. He's a fucking legend. So
Yeah.
I think like I'm playing with the guys I really want to play with. I have to say, good question. If I Well, of course, then there, let's put it this way. If I could, not necessarily metal musicians, but I could ever play with, let's say, either Geddy Lee or Alex Lifeson of Rush, that would be
Okay.
pretty amazing because I absolutely love their music.
Mm.
And they're great musicians as well. And it would be like mind blowing to play with them. And for the more extreme stuff, actually, a musician I've always admired for his composition skill is Ishan. So maybe that's something that's even in the cards sometime. I
Okay,
mean,
okay.
it's more likely than playing with the Rush guys, but that would be a dream come true for sure.
Great, great. So speaking of the death metal in Germany now, do you think your
Okay.
country has a particular sound into this style? Because bands like Necrophages, Alkaloid, Obscura, and your solo project have similar approach to the progressive and technical death metal. Do you think
Yes.
you?
It's funny that you name these bands because it's pretty much the same people involved.
Yeah.
It's always the same guys. So it's a handful of, or maybe two handful of persons, and that's about it. So yeah, this is so funny because Alex Webster once asked me a very similar thing, and he referred to as German death metal, like bands like Obscura and Necrophages. And to me, it's mind blowing because in Germany, there's not much music like that.
Yeah.
Most death metal that death metal musicians like and play in Germany is either Swedish death metal or like old school stuff,
Yes.
like Asphyx or this. There are a few exceptions, of course. Another band that is kind of popular outside of Germany would be Defeated Sanity, which is super
Yeah.
brutal and technical. But they also they are I wouldn't say the only band, but they are really an exception. And Necrophages was a huge exception.
Yes.
And so maybe there are like more younger bands that try to adapt to this style, but from my experience, we were always the outsiders. Nobody liked us back then. In 2003, when I got involved with Necrophages, nobody cared in Germany. Like, basically, we were the enemy because we had guitar solos. It's ridiculous. It's like, oh, you're not brutal enough. I rather listen to whatever,
Yeah. Wait. Okay.
Cannibal Corpse or or sometimes in Germany, back in the days, you had these people that wouldn't listen to any death metal that is newer than 1993. So,
Okay,
so it's
okay.
really, really conservative from my experience. Maybe that changed, I don't know. But
Well,
yeah, I can say it's really conservative. It's not, yeah. The similarities you mentioned between this, or you noticed between these bands, well, it's so strange because it does not resemble the German death metal scene at all. Like not even 10%. It's the most successful bands outside of Germany in death metal,
yeah,
yes. But
yeah,
in Germany, of course, people know these bands, but nobody's, it's still an exception. It's not like a role model. I have the, with other bands in other countries, I have a different feeling. I have the feeling that, for instance, in Poland, Poland have great death metal bands like Behemoth, Vader, Decapitated, just to name 3 of them. But there are many more bands that sound. But I think in Poland, I had the impression that people look up to their own bands and that they say, yeah, they are a role model for us. We like what they're doing. They're our bands, and we like what they do, and we want to do something that follows their footsteps in a certain way. This is not the way in Germany, not at all. It's really death metal scene in Germany, from my perspective, is like time traveling back to the early 90s, and that's where
yeah,
they
yeah,
want to stay.
yeah,
And
yeah,
this is not my world, so
yeah, yeah, yeah. I understood that because when I start to hear that metal from Germany in the 90s or 80s, I just listen to the common stuff, Morgoth, Immortalis, Obscenity, but this is common stuff. So that when Necrophize appear, whoa, for me it's all I'm outside from Germany. I'm Latin America, and I hear, wow, that's amazing. It's technical. That metal really is a technical metal, not like Demolish way, but it's a different way from the US, from the Finland. But there's a few bands that played there. But I think Necrophize was a big influence in the world because many bands in Canada, many bands in Swedish, like Spell Possession, Visceral Bleeding, took that faster, brutal, and many notes in 2 seconds.
yeah.
So that's the way that I hear Necrophiles from the first time. So into this matter, do you hear new bands in Germany that play that style that you are devout, like progressive technical things, apart from the usual suspects?
What are a few younger bands that apply this kind of style in general, that like well, crazy techniques with blast beats and so on, and making it also sound melodic at the same time. So there are a few bands, yes. Also in the German speaking community, there's also some bands in Austria who are doing that kind of stuff these days. There's one band I mixed last year that was called Viral. They're from South Tyrol, like northern Italy, but it's German speaking part. And they also have very ambitious songwriting and pretty long and progressive songs, and there's a lot going on. And I think they really kind of embrace this technical style a bit. But there's more bands like that. Yes, I mean, I think there is a scene growing, but again, it's not a super popular style.
Yeah.
So the number of bands that are doing it is kind of limited.
No. Yes, yes. I forgot to tell one. Cytotoxins from Germany too. I forgot.
Which one?
Cytotoxin.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, true.
Yeah, I forgot. So now one thing that you said in your last answers, we will focus on your work as a producer on Mordor Studios or Sounds, sorry, where you work with other bands. What do you ask the musician when they are recording with you? Do you help with editing, strike triggers, and more things that helps the music will be best according to the mark now? Because many of people wants to prefer a very clean way to hear music, no? Or do you
Yeah.
recommend to record like no and demand more practice instrument? You have to practice more with the instrument to record a good parts in the in your record. So what does you recommend for the new ones in this way?
Of course, I always recommend to prepare, to be fully prepared and best prepared. But my mindset as a recording engineer is I try to capture what they bring to the table. When I record the musician and I respect his his performance. First of all, I will record whatever that musician performs, and if I think there's possibilities to improve that by giving him tips, like let's say, hey, maybe play it like this, or then I will do that. But first of all, I think I have to respect the composition of what they came up with and what it is. And if it's clear what the composition is, then I can judge the performance. And I have to think. I have to, respect the performance. I cannot just delete everything and quantize it and turn it into something that it's not. I think that would not. If you can improve something and make it sound better by technology and still keep the spirit of the performance of that person, I think that's okay. If I'm really altering and changing everything that this person has recorded and make it into like some kind of computer, that is not my approach. I think I would rather even if it's not 100% perfect, computer perfect or whatever, but if it has energy, I would rather keep the performance that has a certain energy and a certain personality. And I think I have to respect the musician with his sound and his personality and try to make that work in the best way. Not have a preoccupied idea of what sound is and then force people to fit into that. I rather would do it the other way around. Like what are the person sounding like? How can I fit myself, my own recording approach to that person? Because I think that makes a good engineer, not saying I'm a producer and I do it this way and that's all we're gonna do. I have one guitar amp, I set this up and this is your sound. I would never do that. I would always ask the people, what do you like? How do you play? What fits your sound? For instance, there's a difference between guitar players. They sound different on different guitar amps. So you have to choose. If they don't have a choice, their favorite choice, you have to choose a guitar amp that fits their personality. So not the other way around.
Okay. Well, Hannes, the sad moment arrived at this interview. I hope you enjoyed this one as I did.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Because 4, 5, 6 years ago, I was did an article in Dargetic.com to speak the best drummers into the death metal, and you are one of them. You're one of them. So thanks for this interview again. I'm a drummer. I'm a drummer too, but you are on different level. You're on different level. So any last words for your fans here in Latin America that someday will expect with your project, with Alkaloid, with perhaps you union in a gig with Hate Eternal? Who knows? Who knows?
I hope that Latin America is one place where I have not. I don't know. Latin America, does that include Mexico, or is Mexico actually North America? Okay, I've played in Mexico, but I've never played in South America, and I thought like, yeah, that's a big. The spot is still missing. It's a big gap in my career, not having played there yet, and I definitely would like to play there and experience the audience, because everybody who went down there and every musician from Europe who has been to South America, and they all told me, hey, it's great, you have to go there. Audiences are crazy, and yeah, with the COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately, no live concert are possible. But I'm hoping for the best that we, can catch up and play live again, and also for you guys down there, to, you know, because
Great.
I think live is the real deal. It's
Yeah. No,
probably
it's
my favorite thing. And
yes. One thing before we leave in this interview. So, do you perhaps now the technology approves this? Perhaps with Hannes Grossmann project, we'll do a streaming concert because now it's possible. You can play with
you're right.
many people in Germany, in Switzerland, in Brazil, and Costa Rica, and they play together.
Yeah,
Perhaps.
it's true, but it's not the same thing. The streaming, it's not a live show, and
Yeah.
when you have to stream, I mean, you have to set it up like in a recording studio, and then I don't know, then I'm too much of an engineer to just let that go. Then I would rather record it and produce it to the way it's perfect, and then it's no live show anymore.
Yeah.
So I'd rather go to your place and play there. I would prefer that. But you're right. I mean, who knows? It's an interesting thought to maybe make that happen one day. Yeah, in a streaming concert, it's possible. I could see that.
Other question that I remember is in all your albums, and I think in many projects of you played with Mauryan.
Yeah.
With Mauryan. So what did you select the special voice for Florian? Because I spoke last year because they recorded Florian, the new album for Dark Fortress.
Yeah.
And what do you think about his vocal methods from him? Why you select this one? Because in Europe has a lot of cultural people to can sing your songs.
Yeah, well, first of all, what a lot of people don't realize with Mauryan is that he is that his job, his main profession is being a classical composer.
No,
so he sits at home and writes orchestra pieces. This is something I could never do. He studied composition at a conservatory, and it takes another. Yeah, he has 20 years of experience in the classical field and is a metal guy, and this is very, very unique. And he has some abilities that I have not seen with other musicians. And this is something a lot of people don't really realize. Of course, he's doing Dark Fortress for fun. It's a fun project, but his composition skills are next level. So that is something that, for instance, on this album, he only, because of COVID-19, we were not able to meet each other, so he only recorded one song at home. But on the albums, on the previous albums where he sang on my solo records, he did not learn a single song. He did not even hear it before he went into the studio. He came into the studio and said, like, okay, you got songs. Oh, where are the lyrics? Okay, right here. Okay, play the song. Now tell me, what is the rhythm? He made notations. They're like, okay, hit record. 1 or 2 takes, done. Like, I don't know anybody else who can do that. Like, to really it's like Inception. You just plant it into his head, and he knows the parts, like by listening to it once. So that's a next level skill. So yeah, it makes it very comfortable to work with him, because he's so fast with learning stuff, with understanding, and his knowledge of music and music theory. It's really helping him to understand music. With just 1 or 2 listens, he really gets it, and that's a different thing. Probably it was nice for you to interview him because he can speak Spanish fluently.
Yeah.
It's another reason to go to South America with Alkaloid.
Okay. Well, thank you very much again, Hannes. It was a pleasure to talk with you. You're a big one.
Likewise.
You're a great guy, man.